Here we go, back in the room. And as we go through this, as we look at spiritual lighting through the ages, and I'll take you on a small journey, you can see how bringing natural light into the building was so important back in the day. And you can also see how building technology advanced through the ages. So I can't, let me just see, Reims Cathedral. Phil, I can't see the title of this one. I've got, let's pull it down. Bear with me. Yeah, Reims Cathedral is one I made earlier. And again, you can start see windows getting bigger, windows at the top to light the ceiling. Spiritual quality to the light. You know, you can only imagine this building full of candles. Westminster Abbey, and now there's sort of not only are the windows getting bigger, more complicated shapes, suddenly we're starting to get patterned glass. And you know, when we talk about our dedication of lighting heritage buildings, think of the dedication, the respect you should pay this building, the dedication to the builders, the dedication to the glass makers. Every pane of glass in this building handmade. Saint Denis Cathedral in Paris, France, stunning, absolutely stunning. And all of a sudden we're getting into a storytelling narrative, not just the light, but the stories told within these window panes. Notre Dame Cathedral. I mean, that's almost a peacock. That's absolutely beautiful, and you know, it's a wonderful effect with natural light, and you can see the respect that we have to pay when it comes to lighting such monuments. Süleymaniye Mosque, Istanbul, absolutely bathed with light. And you see that ring of now artificial light. Once upon a time, that would have been candles. Stunning. St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, very, very bold. The statues are 14 foot high, and still the way light plays within the building is fabulous. Melk Abbey in Austria, and we can see that now the churches, the building techniques, we're becoming more ornate. A little bit fussy for my taste, but you know, I love the opportunity to light this one. And then suddenly this is still Melk Abbey, but suddenly we've got churches where paintings on the ceiling, almost painted by the hand of God. But look at the natural light streaming into the space. For my taste, I think this is a picture from a while ago. I would conceal the lighting. And it's a little bit scallopy for me, the artificial light on the ceiling, but we'll come to the detail, and like we say, the devil's in the detail as we go through the presentation. This is Frank Lloyd Wright, almost the godfather of Art Deco architecture, and even this would be, although this is probably a building from the 20s or the 30s, this would still be considered a heritage building. And this study of spiritual light is gonna take us through some really interesting buildings. This is a heritage building of the future. This is John Paulson, very minimalist architect. Saint Denis Church, Saint Moritz Church in Switzerland, and almost very modernistic, very minimalistic, but harking back to those classic days of bringing light into the building. Cathedral of Christ the Light in Oakland, California, and gotta be a heritage classic of the future. And there's so much more than just light going on in this space. You've got the wonderful feeling of the natural wood and how that makes you feel. It's almost spiritual design meets biophilic design with the daylight coming in and the use of natural materials. This is the Cambridge Mosque by Marks Barfield. Absolutely stunning. You know, never mind hug a tree. This is hug architecture. And again, although this is very new, it's harking back to those sort of, you know, you've almost got the oculus there in the center and natural light streaming in, and at the same time, this is a very tactile, spiritual space. And, you know, personally, I would call this heritage already. Church of the Cross by Tatao Ando. Just creative ways of using natural daylight and bringing them into the space. And these are all things to be considered as we go through the execution of heritage lighting. We start talking about layers and hierarchies and not lighting everything. You need the little contrasting dark patches, and you get this real feeling of perspective as you go through a space. And this is how it would have been back in the day, you know, castles, churches, long before artificial light. You've got daylight streaming in and candles, and they're an oft overlooked lighting effect of candles. I love candles and regularly just lighting my house by candlelight. So what makes a heritage building? And I guess that's different all over the world, because in the UK we've got a very sort of quite simple system. We have grade 1 listed buildings, which are buildings of national importance, and grade 2 listed buildings, which are buildings of local importance. Not all of these projects in this presentation are lit by me, but this one is Canterbury Cathedral in UK. And we're doing something different here, actually. Usually, when I light a building like this, I prefer more shadow, more interest, but it actually sits in a dip. And so we're actually lighting it like a beacon to call people to prayer. Sorry, losing the buttons. So as you can see, there's not as much shadow and interest in this building as I would like. Usually uniformity is the last thing you're looking for on a heritage building. But I was fortunate enough to do the master plan around it. So, you know, we've got some contrast in this garden and contrast in the way that we've lit it, and still it stands there big and proud as a beacon, calling people to prayer. And in the case studies, we'll look at what I did in the historical town centre, where we replicated gaslight. The Colosseum, obviously, a national monument in Italy, very, very important building. You know, it's just heritage by its very historical nature. This is St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and we're going to hark back on this because there's a case study of a building that I looked at just to the right of this bridge. And what I like about the City of London is it has a very defined master plan in how to light its historic buildings and the use of light within the city. This is United Grand Lodge. This is a Freemasons Hall in central London. And again, it's lit a little bit like a beacon, calling the fraternity to their worship, whatever they worship. But, you know, even here, we've got visual interest in as much as if you look at the columns at the bottom, they're lit in relief. We've almost lit the portico entrance and the columns stand silhouetted. This is Outer Rafe. This is This is where I work now, and I'm spending many an evening standing in for Spears Major. But when we talk about the historical importance of this design, this design takes us back. It's very warm, and it's lit almost like firelight. And I'm just at the moment this area of pathway in front. I'm lighting them for the Ardar dances, and the Ardar dances are the spirit of Najdi. It's the pride of the region. Najdi is the style of architecture. And so what I'm doing is, we could just light those dancers in white light, but we're lighting them in a red light, as if an Apache red light, as if we're dancing around the fire. But at the same time, coming from television and film industry, I realized that sometimes they may need to film these dances. So we can program the lights to put white light on the vertical and illuminate the dancers for television, while keeping sort of historical, sort of more firelight on the floor and in the background. So light and heritage buildings, the importance of shadow and contrast. Now we get into a little bit of the details. And if you were in my team and we were looking at a heritage building, we'd be looking at the history, we'd be trying to find the stories, we'd be sketching, I'm just trying to show you some of the principles. This is by no means everything about lighting heritage buildings. Interesting, this one. So here's an interesting technique. I realize this all the more now because we've got an area at Al Chiraif that we can't put lights in because it's still hallowed ground. It hasn't been excavated by the archaeologists. So until they do, we don't have permission to fit any lights there. But this is a Grade 1 listed building, and they wouldn't let them attach the lighting in front of the columns. They wouldn't let them drill any holes. So they bonded the lights to the building. So we're not just having to think about what we're going to light and how we're going to light it. We've got to think how we can be less evasive to the building. And all the other, it's a holistic business, this light design business. So all the other considerations, sustainability, energy efficiency, easy to install, no light pollution. You don't just get to say, I'm lighting a heritage building, so all deals are off. I love this. I love how this sits on top of a hill, and you've just got a kiss of light on this building to make it stand out and be noticed on the top of the hill. And I think as well, the slight warmth in the light makes a wonderful contrast to the snow around it. Probably doesn't look quite the same in the summer, but we'll live with that. Really, really interesting. In most cases, there's always exceptions. That's the thing about lighting. There's always, guidelines, and there's always exceptions to the guidelines. Canterbury Cathedral, I presented uniformity on a heritage building. Here, if you have uniformity here, you take away the shape, you take away the layers. So it's really, really important when you're lighting these buildings to consider what you don't like, because those turrets, the moment you overlight them, the moment you fill in those shadows at the back, you just flatten the whole surface. And it's an interesting thing, even at Al Chiraif, it's lit sort of in this apricot warm, fiery glow. And you need a little bit of accent light, else the world just becomes like this sea of apricot. And the best way I can describe it is, if you lived in Bourneville in the UK, they've got the Cadbury's factory there, and you get out of your car if you visit and the world smells of chocolate. But if you smell chocolate every day, then the smell of chocolate disappears. So that's something to consider as well, that using color contrast at the same time as using shadow contrast, just to make it work. We talk about color, and it can be used as a stunning contrast. It can also be used kind of as visual noise or graffiti, and you know, I think this is very appropriate with the lighting on the floor and the lighting in the background, and it helps give texture and those layers of depth that we were talking about earlier. This is almost classic to me, that sort of play of light and shadow, and I really can't emphasize enough that what you don't light is as important as what you do light. And also really important is, and we'll come to this in more detail through the presentation, but you know, when I have these buildings, I go and spend time there. I see what's around them. I get a feel of them. When I went to Al Churaif, they've got mud walls. I was able to put my hand actually on the mud walls and the stone, and almost feel that history seeping into me, the stories. And that's, you know, immersing yourself in the history, immersing yourself in the culture is what makes you a better designer. And that's where the ideas come from. Yeah, it's not just a case of looking at it in plan. So important to visit. This is interesting because we start looking at techniques, and you can see sort of almost the cloisters on the right, and the columns in front of them are lit in relief. So again, they're silhouetted with the light in sort of the cloisters behind. But then when we come to the, you know, we talk about hierarchy of the building and the entrance being more important. So we still have the entrance portico lit, but we've put narrow beams up the columns, and it's, you know, hierarchy, importance of buildings, importance in the context of the whole space, all very, very, very important. I just love this. I don't know, something about warm light and snow, and it's just simplicity, and that's another interesting thing, because most modern buildings are made of concrete, steel, and glass, and these days they tend to lack sophistication. And where you've got surface, you can have sophistication, and I just think, I don't know, I have no idea who did this, but they deserve a round of applause, whoever it was. Classic, picking what you like, just making a feature at the top. Probably, I don't have the entrance of this building, but probably at the entrance as well. You know, buildings aren't Lego bricks. You don't have to light all of them. And I just, again, think this is a very, very classic example of heritage lighting, choosing what to light. Really simple. This is a statue that means something, and to just really, really control your light and what you're lighting, and let it stand out about, you know, this, irrespective of heritage lighting. This is classic outdoor lighting. This is classic accent lighting. This is top marks. And you know, we get into where we use color, and it's really funny when I say color. You can have celebratory color, temporary color, but where you use color as the main ingredient of your lighting plan, I think we have to be so careful. And even when we use it as the main ingredient of our celebratory or event lighting, I mean, I once drove by the Tower of London, and you know, someone projected something on it, and to me it was just wrong. To me it looked like visual noise, it looked like graffiti. So, and I accept that lighting is subjective, but I think this is a really appropriate use of color. This is one of mine, and we're back to the Grand Temple inside Freemasons Hall, Now, I have no clue what those symbols mean, but I know they're important to the members. So in this case, I had to light them with concealment. I had to light them with perfection, perfect illumination, to tell the story. And quite often we have stories to tell within such buildings. This is the monument to the fallen. So the moment you've got some contrast, you've got something more respectful, you've got something more sophisticated, and the glass behind is backlit, and we've got simple accent lighting on the figures, but not overlit. British Museum, again, I think just as a contrast, this color works. The accent lighting of the monument and the color in the background. Really interesting as well, using daylight in museum spaces, and think about how we can use modern technology, how we can use sort of Bluetooth and wireless to not have to lay extra layers of evasive cables, how we can use kinetic switching, how we can use the fact that Bluetooth is spatially aware. So at the same time as it's controlling the lights, it could be given a commentary into your ear about the art pieces. It's spatially aware. So when you stand in front of this piece, we've got technology, and it's how we use it. And I think if we're using it in a cultural and historical and storytelling sense, it's great. I think the downside of that is every now and then you're going to hear an advert for Coca-Cola or McDonald's, but as long as it's not overused, I don't have too much of a problem with it. I like this. I like the simplicity of it, and I like the way how the blue at the end makes it pop. I accept the lighting subjective. I accept that some of you looking at this will think that's inappropriate use of color, but I like it. This is one of mine. This is Chapel of the Lady at the Undercroft, and again, still try and harness the daylight, choosing what we like, what we don't like, and let in the shadow become part of the layers of the space, the sophistication of the space, and the spirituality of the space. Pretty much the same principle, the Lady Chapel at Hereford Cathedral. Sort of now we're talking about appropriate lighting of these spaces. And I don't mean this nasty, but I once got pulled into a church in Sandwich in Kent, where the guy that had done it was so obsessed with the light level on the horizontal plane where the hymn book would be, that he had these floodlights and he just pointed them down. And he had the most beautiful roof. If he'd just turned them up and bounced the light off the ceiling, he would have got, maybe 50 lux less, but would have raised the roof, got a much better space. Beautiful. You really feel it's a cathedral. A cathedral is an important space, an important church. It's not just a church, but this, in Rome, there are 300 churches called Santa Maria. And we took shelter from the rain in one of them, an insignificant little church in a little cul-de-sac in Rome. And we only went in it because it was raining. And this church was like it was painted by the hand of God. It was stunning. So I personally don't accept that all spiritual places shouldn't be lit to this standard. This is lit to this standard just because it's a cathedral. Fabulous. Again, you can argue what you like, and they've lit the niche behind the statue. I think that's dramatic. They've lit the sort of covered portico behind the columns. It's a classic approach, but we'll look at other approaches as we go. And this is a great slide because it kind of shows the same building. This is actually Phillips. They call it Lidac. It's sorry, not Lidac. Name's gone, but they've got an outside lighting application center, and they've got it set up that they can show this building with the different approaches to lighting the column. The one on the left, they've side lit the columns, so the glow. The one in the middle, they backlit the columns, so you've got them silhouetted. And then on the other side, it's a mix. They've lit the building and made the building as important as the columns. So there's no right way, there's no wrong way, but what you can do when you're doing this is consider the hierarchies of the building. And like that previous slide where they front lit the columns at the entrance. And here you see just a classically illuminated old heritage building. This is interesting. This was done by Lighting Design International. And it's the entrance to a hotel, but this is how it's planned. And this is how it looks. Quite classic. But again, if you look at this, if you look at the top and the bottom, look at what they're doing at the bottom. There's more light at the bottom, and they're funneling you to that entrance. This is one of mine. This is the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. And, we've got some quite stunning architecture to light. And we've got a quite stunning ceiling to light. But we've got kind of the juxtaposition between what we're doing up there and what we're doing down here on the art pieces. So, we're lighting the architecture, but when we're down here, we're back to classic museum lighting, and we've probably got, 15:1 contrast there between the accent lighting of the figure in the foreground and the darkness behind. Just taking you through the Victoria and Albert Museum. And how we can sometimes do something that's almost quite modern and yet classic at the same time. This is the tea room. Quite dramatic space. I smile because the memory comes back of taking tea with Angela there. Details. This is something you find. Again, this is just in Riyadh. The pole is Athelwood, which is a local tree that grows in the area, and it never gets sort of bigger than about 180 millimeters and never really get bigger than a 3-foot length. And we've got lanterns hanging off. That's history right there. And again, we're back to our Riyadh, but almost not overlighting things to create the shape. And you've got slightly different, and what the actual texture of the place really helps create this hierarchy, because the walls are slightly different, so take color differently. Some of the walls are leaning backwards, some of the walls are leaning forwards. It's such an interesting place. It really is. I urge everyone to visit. So let's take a quick look at events and celebratory lighting. Eiffel Tower. Fabulous, lit up as the French tricolour. I much prefer, there's a disaster in France or somewhere and everyone lights with respect in unison, lights the French colours on a building in solidarity with France. But I much prefer it when it's a national day or a celebratory day, that it's a celebratory reason, not remembering a disaster. I think this is so appropriate. This is an old dock in Croatia, and they've turned the heritage of this dock into light art, and that's celebratory. That's so important to me. I think it was Dean Skeerer, but I take my hat off to the man. Great design. Appropriate things, Remembrance Day. This was the sea of poppies, just gently washed and illuminated, but it's equally as effective when we use projection, and this is inside Lincoln Cathedral, and this is remembering people's sacrifice. This is important stuff. But it can be wacky, and we've all seen, Buckingham Palace with projection of council housing on it and the Union Jack flag. And to me, if this was permanent, I would hate it. This is graffiti on the face of the building. This is actually the Fitzwilliam Museum. But as something funky and fun, yeah, I'm all for it. They do this regularly on the Sydney Opera House, and when it's Aboriginal art or something cultural, I don't have a problem with it. When they're advertising horse racing or the Melbourne Cup, I'm not so enamoured. So this is Al Chiraif. This is the Ministry of Culture is the column on the right, just to the right of centre. We're standing above that, looking. I've spent hours and hours and hours in these viewing positions. We've just had National Day in Saudi Arabia, so this is the colours of the flag. Again, on the same principle, it's important that we don't turn everything green, but the white light that you see in the centre is actually the light from the Batil Cafe, and we're doing something about that. But once a month, the moon is really important in Islamic culture. We do this like moon phase on the building, and this, like the moon, this gently phases. This is Spears and Major. Don't look at the awful lighting in the foreground, because believe me, we're fixing that. Global approach to heritage illumination. This is awful. I quite like the bit at the bottom, but what's the colour about? Where's the context? It's overlit. It's just, for me, whoever did that wants shooting. Jury's out on this one. Is it fun? Is it have I caught them in a celebratory moment? But if this was the permanent lighting, not really for me. I prefer something a little bit more sophisticated. But lighting in India of temples can be quite simple, cheap lines of LED, probably Chinese, cheap spotlights, flags and bunting, but yet somehow it's authentic and somehow it works. This is the Golden Temple at Amritsar, the famous Sikh temple, and it does what it says on the tin. It's the Golden Temple, and it's lit accordingly. It's a place I'd love to visit. Again, Indian temples, Indian monuments. This is a little bit more sophisticated. I did, this is UNESCO World Heritage Site, the village of Hani in Yunnan province in China, where we did the master plan. And, the master plan is very much celebratory of, at the same, celebratory of clouds on paddy fields, and but also you have to look when you're doing these things at the important historical context of this village, but also the usage of the people that live there and the usage of the visitors. So it has to be holistically thought and worked out. There's no one size fits all. This is the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. Again, Spears and Major on this occasion, and again taking the moon, the phases of the moon, very much as inspiration. It's a mosque we were involved in when I was at Umayya Design. Just think, it's not overlit, it just look at it against the sky. Choose what you like. You don't have to like everything. This one makes my left eye twitch. This is as close as I've come. I've never lit a bridge, and this is as close as I've come. This is the Sisi Pole Bridge in Isfahan. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and we did concept for this bridge, and then the local government changed, and the new government didn't go ahead with it. So if there are any clients out here, I'd love to light a bridge. This was done by Amadit Dugal. This is actually a Buddhist temple in India. And I love the control of the light here, because he's lighting this from these light poles, and yet he's aiming and he's focusing is sublime. It's really interesting. I should have put an inside shot, because they have this huge slab of stone, like concave slab of stone. And again, how he's illuminated that is very much, it's actually quite a new building, but you know, anything that's culturally important takes the same heritage approach. This is the Acropolis in Athens. It was Eleftheria Deco. It's winning awards all over the place. Fabulous. Sitting there as a monument on top of the hill, and the escarpment lit as well. And you know, we've got escarpments all around our development, and getting that sort of interest in the foreground, you know, contrasts what you're doing up on the hill. I think that's fabulous. You can't always look at things in isolation. You have to look at them together. Alula, and lots of it's a development in Saudi Arabia, again like ours. It's historically and culturally important. It's the one I see as most similar to what we're doing, and just the use of candles, just to take you back, so to speak. Interesting, lighting around conservation areas. I was lucky enough, and I don't have an image. I'd love to show you an image, but I lit the Taj Palace Hotel in Agra, which is the last building facing the Taj Mahal. If I'd have done anything blingy, if I'd let my ego get the better of me, I would have committed a crime to architecture. I couldn't do anything other than subtle sophistication. And fortunately, it's an Art Deco facade, so it lent itself to that. So context, you know, the importance of lighting around heritage buildings and neighbours. Nothing to do with me. This is just part of the old Roman wall in a street called London Wall in London, in the city of London. And I love just how the warmth of that old monument stands against the cooler. And I just think that's good planning all round. The little red dot in the centre of there is Vodafone HQ. And I got involved in a planning case over a media screen, and those brown areas all around it are conservation areas. So it's not sitting in a conservation area, it's sitting adjacent to it. And they were told unequivocally they couldn't have a media screen on the outside of the building. So what they did, very clever, a little bit sneaky, they put it inside the building. And it then becomes a mute area, and Southwark Council was still saying, you can't turn it on, we'll stop you. And I got involved as an expert witness. But what I tried to get them to do, around there, they have 3 world-class theatres. They have the Old Vic, the Young Vic, and the Menier Chocolate Factory. I tried to get them to make 70% of their content artistic and promoting these theatres, and only 30% adverts. And it's actually stronger. You're engaging with the community. You're not just shoving Vodafone adverts down their throats. Vodafone being Vodafone, they didn't take my advice, and we did go to court, and we just argued the merits that it was inside the building, so Southwark Council couldn't do anything about it. This is one of mine had involvement in this, and this is how you can do something quite modern on top of an old building, but it still kind of works. I like it. You're going to run through some bonus case studies. How am I doing for time? Okay, we've got time. This was Canterbury. Just behind those buildings at the end, you've got Canterbury Cathedral. And what we did in the historic city, we replicated gaslight. So we went really at the amber end of the spectrum to be sort of heritage and historical and important. We're back to Freemasons, the Grand Temple at Freemasons Hall, and we took these Art Deco lights, we repaired them, we put modern light sources in them. This is Temple 10, the Egypt room at Freemasons Hall. And again, there's a dome that there's a dome ceiling that I illuminated perfectly. But the interesting thing about this, I could just light these, but I try and tell stories. And so this is the east of the lodge where the master sits, and it represents sunrise, the sun rising in the east. So I lit this end of the temple like a sunrise and the western end like a sunset. And it's just that detail, find the story. You know, I lit a lot of this building, but it's one of my favorite temples. This is 16 Bowling Green Lane, and it's grade 2 listed because of James Johnston. He bought the building. He started the Morning Herald there, which went on to become the Evening Standard. And, you know, we chose what we lit, and we chose how we lit it. We got it past heritage and one thing and another. But we also tried for a little bit of storytelling in the entrance with some projection of script and so on and so forth. Find the story where it's appropriate. We're back to the building that I mentioned and the importance of looking around buildings. But, you know, behind it, you know, where the building to the right of the bridge is St. Paul's Cathedral. So we've got to light this building with elegance and simplicity and sophistication. Now, the interesting thing is I hadn't seen the City of London's master plan at the time, but you didn't have to tell me that I have to light that with, you know, with respect to the building behind that. And what I like about the master plan, it looks at the usage of the whole of the city, and, you know, even to events and celebratory lighting, you know, as master plans go. Again, it's Spears and Major. But, you know, if you get your hands on a copy of it, it's well worth a read in how to do a master plan. I mean, sometimes the heritage can be the art that you're lighting. This is one of mine, British Museum Terracotta Warriors exhibition. And we're really telling stories in how we light these figures now, we light around it, and how, you know, we have some projection screens around it to tell stories. And I think probably there's no more space in the museum and gallery space for pushing the envelope of telling stories these days. The Chhatrapati Shivaji Mumbai International Airport T2, that's easy for me to say. Well, it is, because it's 3 years of my life. I was lucky to work the J.R. Hay artworks within the museum, and these are heritage artworks from all over India. So here, the airport's new, designed to look like a white peacock, but the artworks are hard, old, and they're lit with total sympathy. And that's an installation of faces and fascias. We've got a flying peacock that flies 150 meters around the curve. So we've got theatrical lights to pick it up. But what we do before the light show, it flies for 3 minutes on the hour. The house lights go down, and we replicate the dance of the white peacock in graphical 3D light over these very three-dimensional artworks, trellises, jowlies, huts. And then we track the bird, and it doesn't just fly in a curve, it goes to visit its friends. And then at the end, we take the client, the viewer, the visitor in the airport back to the historical pieces one by one before my lights go off and the house lights come back on. Well, I was the art lights as well, so I guess the house lights were mine as well. Wonderful project. So many stories to sell. Fish that swim, birds that flies. And just a quick looking for stories. I didn't even know this story, but you notice the locusts on the back, the big locust wing and the locusts flying there. The cat's just in it because the artist likes cats. And I was focusing the lights, and the wonderful curator, a guy with an aura, a guy called Rajiv Sethi, speaks with a whisper. And he said to me, he said, David, he said, do you know the significance of the locusts? And I said, Rajiv, sir, no. He said, the locusts represent the Indian people. He said, because Indians traditionally, the locusts migrate to feed, and the Indians traditionally have to migrate to other cities and other countries to feed their families. And I didn't know this story, and I was so touched to hear it. And then the penny dropped that at the time I was taking 90 flights a year to feed my family, and that made me a locust too. So just humor wherever you look for it. Wadi Mall in Dubai. The nature, because we're sort of going, you know, all Tutankhamun and all hieroglyphics and totems. Although this is a new mall, it's a mall with its feet anchored in the past. So we take a very sophisticated approach to it. Quick, interesting story. Not everything we do in life is measured in dollars. This building is the Zelina Synagogue in Slovakia. And we were there looking at ski slopes, funny enough. And we came across this building that had fallen into disrepair. And it's historically important because it's a Peter Behrens building. And Peter Behrens was the grandfather of the Bauhaus movement. And it's a synagogue, but there's no Jews there now because of the Second World War and ethnic cleansing. So what they were doing is bringing it back to life as a cultural centre. So because it's important, and like I say, some things are just worth doing because they're important, we gave them free lighting design consultancy. And then my partner at the time was German. And so because of the Second World War, we went to some German lighting manufacturers and laid the guilt trip on them and managed to get sort of free lighting from the likes of Urco. This was one I was doing just before COVID hit. This is Zloty Tarasy in Poland. It's a shopping centre, as June Architects. And that's the front of the building, lovely. But the back of the building, a road called Zloty, in the middle of the road used to be where the ghetto, the Jewish ghetto, ended. And so the entrance at the back of the mall, and there's a photo of it on the right, it's an insignificant entrance. It looks like the entrance to an office building, not a great shopping centre. But this is very important to the Jewish people. So in my concept, knowing the importance of the road, knowing the importance of the entrance, I had to pay homage, not in a looking back in a critical way, history is history, but in a celebratory way of life and the importance of the human spirit. I could not ignore this entrance. So this entrance became very important in my concept thinking. This is something we're doing now, and we're lighting some of the heritage assets. And you know, that's Chris, my number 2, in the background there. And you don't need to overlight that little entrance that's attached to a historic building. But quickly, the building on the left is a historical mud hut, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to hang an amber lantern in there. And then I'm speaking with the development director, and he said, "You can't hang an amber lantern." He said, "We can't drill in, it's historical. We can't drill into the ceiling and put a hook and hang a lantern." So, never one to be phased easily. I just said, "We'll stand it on the table." There's always a way. We're just making it glow, just making it look like someone still lives there. So, we've covered medieval times and had a look at why heritage buildings and historical buildings are so important. We've looked at what makes a heritage building. We've looked at the importance of shadow and contrast and where colour's appropriate. We've looked at even using them as backdrops for events and celebratory lighting. We've looked at a global approach to heritage illumination. You've got to remember, culture is different. When I'm designing in India, I've got my Indian hat on. I've never designed for European culture in India. Lighting around conservation areas, that's important. Looked at a few case studies, and I've just told you what you've just heard. Guys, you're going to love this last one. Thank you. That's us. This is what we say in Diriyah, one Diriyah. So, one Diriyah to you all. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Any questions, please?